Unearthed Horrors. 5 terrifying true tales of sinister secrets in cursed new homes. Emily had thought she found refuge in Milwaukee, a charming suburb full of warm smiles, children's laughter, and baked goods delivered by neighbors who offered unsolicited advice. After a year of relentless financial struggle in chaotic Chicago, uprooting her 2 kids, Max and Sophie, to this seemingly idyllic neighborhood felt like a fresh start. But beneath the surface, something was festering, waiting to consume them whole. Nightfall brought an eerie calm, broken only by unsettling whispers that meandered through the walls of their new home. Emily could hear them when all else was quiet. She would lay awake, her heart racing as familiar voices echoed lightly in the darkness, sending chills down her spine. "Stay with us," they cooed, haunting and persuasive. Flickering lights kept her on edge, pulsing in sync with her quickening pulse. What was wrong with this place? She shook her head and dismissed it as stress. After all, her furniture had a way of rearranging itself overnight, pieces in odd configurations like a jigsaw puzzle she never wanted to solve. She could feel shadows dance suspiciously at the edge of her vision, like eyes watching her every move. At first, Max and Sophie laughed, oblivious and jubilant, but those innocent giggles slowly faded into fearful silence, their gaze fixed on the corners of their shared room, unnaturally aware of something she couldn't see. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily dove into the town's obscure history, her dread deepening with each discovery. The friendly smiles of her neighbors no longer felt inviting, they turned cold and guarded, as if they were hiding a truth only whispered in the dark. The previous owners had vanished, and rumor tied the town's leaders to corruption and buried secrets that thrived on fear. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Emily faced mounting financial burdens, her work hours mysteriously cut, city inspectors making unannounced visits, accusing her of violations she had never heard of. Her paranoia grew thicker than the fog that rolled in at night. The whispers escalated, now more of a demanding chant, urging her to stay, to give in. Every time she faced her kids, a jarring realization washed over her. The chilling atmosphere seemed to wrap around them like a smothering blanket. One stormy night, as thunder rumbled like a distant, angry beast, Emily discovered a hidden room in the basement, shrouded in darkness and dust. Her heart raced as she stepped inside, only to uncover the truth: hidden notes and photographs of past families. Murmurs of their struggles danced in her ears as the spirits of those lost filled the room. The town's respected leaders had traded lives for power, their plastered smiles hiding unspeakable horrors. As shadows flickered around her, she stood paralyzed, faced with a decision: protect her children or confront the dark legacy that wanted to ensnare them all. The suffocating grip of past misdeeds tightened, and the chilling whispers intensified. "Stay with us, Emily. You're home now." The door creaked ominously behind her, and the walls seemed to breathe, filled with unspeakable secrets. Would she succumb to the darkness, or find a way to break free before it consumed her whole? Emily's heart pounded in her chest, the terrifying truth swirling in her mind like a storm. The dusty room felt alive, a heartbeat echoing within the walls surrounding her. She could still hear them, the whispers morphing into screams, clawing at her sanity. "Stay with us," they demanded, more forceful now, closing in. Her gaze darted around, landing on the photographs. Each face seemed painfully happy, their smiles twisted into grotesque masks of desperation. Names scrawled on the edges of tattered snapshots bore witness to lives once filled with hope before being swallowed by darkness. "Mom?" The voice broke through her reverie, a soft but shaken call from Sophie. Panic surged in Emily as realization struck her. She had left her kids upstairs, vulnerable to the suffocating grip of the house. What if the whispers had reached them? What if they were calling to Sophie and Max, too? With trembling hands, she snatched a single photograph and sprinted for the basement door, her resolve straining under the weight of dread. The door creaked open laboriously, the house protesting her escape as if it were alive, angered at her intrusion. She dashed up the stairs, heart racing with every echoing footstep, words thrumming in her brain, "Don't go back. They want you here." When she burst into the living room, her breath caught. Max and Sophie were huddled on the floor, gazing up at a flickering light. Shadows swirled, coiling and intertwining like tendrils of smoke. Their eyes were wide, reflecting a terror she had never encountered in them before. "What is it?" she gasped, dropping the photograph. "Mom, we heard them," Max stammered, his small hands trembling. "They talked about us." Emily felt the world crumble as her children spoke. "They said they're keeping you safe. We can be happy here forever," Sophie added, her innocent tone cutting through Emily like a jagged blade. "No!" Emily screamed, lunging forward, her instinct to protect surging like a tidal wave. She scooped her children into her arms, but the whispers crescendoed a cacophony of urgent pleas and sinister promises. The shadows in the corners grew thicker, swirling into dark figures that seemed to reach out toward them, elongating fingers brushing against the walls and trailing closer. "We don't want you to leave," hissed the combined voices, hot breaths against Emily's skin. She squeezed her eyes shut, resisting the pull of those voices, the allure of their promises. Nostalgia surged. Images of Chicago, of their small apartment filled with fighting and fear, flooded her mind. It was chaos compared to the eerie stillness of this place, yet she would rather face that nightmare than surrender to this slow suffocation. "We need to leave. Now." With that command, Emily backed away, dragging her children with her. As they reached the front door, it slammed shut with deafening force. The soft light around them blinked out, replaced by a suffocating darkness that grew heavier with every passing second. Despair clawed at her throat as she twisted the doorknob, panic coursing through her veins. "Help us," she shouted, but the house swallowed her words, leaving only the chant of the whispers echoing in the void, growing louder, a twisted lullaby. "Stay with us." It was a relentless tide, rising over her resolve. Desperation clawed at her gut. Just as she was about to give in, the door rattled, then jerked open unexpectedly, revealing darkened porch steps leading into the unknown. "Follow me," she whispered hoarsely to her children, not knowing if it was safety or the embrace of something more sinister awaiting them outside. As they dashed through the threshold, Emily's heart raced, a final surge of hope battling against the malevolent whispers that now taunted her from the shadows. "Where will we go?" Sophie asked, her voice breaking. "Anywhere but here," Emily replied, but a deep chill settled in her bones. What lay ahead? Freedom or a different kind of trap? And in that moment, as the night swallowed their forms, a new whisper drifted past her ear, almost mocking. "You left us, but we're never truly gone." The air outside hit Emily like a fist, cold and stinging, as they stepped onto the porch. The gloom pressed close, making the surroundings feel as if they were drawn in tight with no escape. The house loomed behind them, a dark monolith, daring them to return. Emily gripped Sophie's hand in one palm and Max's in the other, her pulse quickening with every agonizing second they lingered in uncertainty. "Mom, I can't see anything," Max squeaked, his voice barely above a whisper. The palpable fear wrapped around them, a suffocating shroud. "I know, but we have to keep moving," she urged, trying to inject a calmness she didn't feel into her voice. Eyes darting down the path that stretched into the dense trees surrounding their home, she took a tentative step forward. Branches twisted overhead, creating dark silhouettes against the dim sky. No sounds of crickets or night creatures. Only the silence, deep and unsettling, settled around them, making her skin prickle. Suddenly, a low rustle broke the night. Emily froze, heart racing as she turned her head sharply toward the sound. She squinted into the darkness, searching for what lurked. "Mom?" Sophie pulled at her sleeve, her breath shaky. "Stay close," Emily instructed, gripping their hands tighter. With a surge of brave determination, she took another step forward. The rustling came again, a slithering shadow darting between the trees. She felt a chill creep down her spine. Maybe it's the wind?" Max ventured, though the quiver in his voice betrayed his own doubts. "No wind makes that sound," Emily muttered under her breath as they proceeded further, the oppressive darkness swallowed their silhouettes whole. The whispers from the house seemed to fade, yet the underlying sense of dread lingered, curling around her thoughts like smoke. As they progressed, the path narrowed, and the trees loomed ever larger, knotted limbs resembling clawed hands ready to grasp them at any moment. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't simply about escaping the house. It was as if the very surroundings were part of the nightmare, a new skin of terror replaced where they had once been confined. "Can we just go home?" Sophie whimpered, her small voice breaking the silence. "No. I promise it's better away from there," Emily snapped, though doubt flooded her mind. The whispers were insidious, twisting truths into promises of happiness that clawed at the edges of her paranoia. She pressed on, courage battling against the rising panic beneath her skin. Suddenly, the ground gave way to a clearing, moonlight bathing an ancient stone well in ethereal light. Its edges were slick with moss, and the air around it felt heavy, pregnant with secrets long forgotten. "What is that?" Max pointed, wide-eyed. "Stay back," Emily warned, but her voice wavered. The well seemed to hum, vibrating with energy that echoed the heartbeat of the house. "Look!" Sophie gasped, pointing at something darting within the depths of the well, shadows writhing like a frenzied storm. "Don't look!" Emily cried out, pulling her children away. But the whispers returned, this time softer, like a gentle nudge, meaningful and enticing. "Come closer, see what treasures lie beneath." Emily's heart raced with fear. What treasures? The temptation struck her like an icy gust. Those enticing words pulled at her like a magnet, like they were meant just for her. She fought against it, pushing her kids behind her. "We need to get away from here." But the kids stayed still, their eyes locked onto the well. Too late, she noticed the way their faces contorted in confusion as if the shadows spoke secrets only they could understand. A clawing sensation tightened around her throat. She refused to lose them to this place, forced herself to turn back toward the path they had come from. "Now!" she shouted, desperately. The whispers grew louder, turning her blood cold. "Don't leave us, stay and find out." Then came the shrill laughter, high-pitched and piercing, cutting through the night air, making her stomach churn. Emily spun around, but the children were no longer by her side. "No! Max! Sophie!" she cried, her voice echoed back from the trees. Darkness loomed, and her heart stopped as she realized it wasn't just the well that held secrets. The shadows were alive, slithering toward her, whispers roaring now with fury, the house still holding its dominion. Hungry for its next victims, she darted forward into the night, breathless, but in her mind echoed an ominous thought. What if they were already lost? The ground shifted beneath her feet as she felt the unmistakable pull of the well behind her, urging her to look back and maybe, just maybe, her children wouldn't return. What had the house done to them? She burst through the underbrush like a desperate deer, heart pounding against her ribcage, the overwhelming urge to look back threatening to take control. Branches snagged at her clothes, tearing at her skin, each snag biting like jagged teeth into her flesh. The whispers swirled around her, clawing at her mind like invisible hands, dragging her thoughts into a dark pit of despair. Max. Sophie. The names fell from her lips, frantic and breathless, swallowed whole by the forest. Every second felt heavy, filled with the weight of each unanswered call. Panic surged within her, a tidal wave beneath the surface, desperate to break free. Each step felt like a betrayal of their bond. She stumbled through the trees, the chilling quiet mocking her. It was as if the entire world had turned its back, denying her cries. She didn't dare stop, not for a moment, not until she found them. Suddenly, the rustling noises nested themselves into the darkness once more pronounced, more deliberate. The forest shifted like an animal ready to pounce, and then she heard it, a giggle soft, light, yet taunting. "Mommy, look!" Sophie's voice rang through the trees, bright amidst the shadows, but it was laced with an unnatural quality that tugged at Emily's insides. "No! Stay put!" Emily shouted, panic surging into her veins as she forced herself to change course toward the sound. The trees seemed to conspire against her, branches swaying and creaking as if trying to block her path. She burst into a small clearing and skidded to a stop, eyes wide. There, by the well's edge, were her children, faces aglow with an eerie light, eyes entranced by something deep within the well that she couldn't see. Max. Sophie. Get away from there. Emily screamed, arms outstretched, heartbreaking at the sight. The laughter was gone, replaced by an ominous quiet that dripped into the surroundings like thick, black tar, but they didn't move. They stood frozen, looming shadows of the children she knew, but their expressions were something alien, drawn into the depths as if mingling with those secrets buried deep in the darkness. Feeling as if the air had turned to lead, she hesitated, fear gripping her throat like a vice. What were they seeing? What had the well whispered to them? Mommy, come see. Sophie's voice danced like poison in the air, sweet yet dangerous. It's pretty down there. Please. Just come back. Desperation clawed at her, but her pleading fell silent against the well's irresistible pull. As if sensing her doubts, the ground beneath Emily trembled. She looked down, panic escalating. The earth at her feet churned, shifting, dark tendrils creeping from the well like snakes, curling and weaving toward her. No. No. She cried, stumbling backward. But it felt as if the earth itself was rejecting her, dragging her toward the flimsy edge of reality. The well throbbed, the shadows inside it pulsating like a heartbeat. They reflected the faces of her children. Sweet, innocent, trapped in some unseen longing and exquisite agony. A sinister voice poured forth from the well like syrup. Join them, Emily, it coaxed, velvety yet laced with malice. You all will find peace down here. Stop. She clawed at her own mind, reversing every breath that wanted to succumb to the alluring darkness. Suddenly, Sophie's face shifted, a flicker of confusion crossing her features, just for a moment. Mom? Why don't you come closer? With that, reality cracked, and Emily felt a sudden wave of clarity. This wasn't her children. Whatever had taken hold of them had twisted them into puppets dancing for an unseen master. But then came a surge of understanding. She couldn't leave them, couldn't abandon her children to whatever fate awaited them. With all her strength, she lunged forward, racing against the tide of shadow and whispering dread. Hold on, please. Hold on. Her voice rang out, filled with every ounce of fervor she could muster. As she neared them, shadows pulled at her ankles, trying to trip her, but she fought against the hidden terrors. The moment became a flurry of screams, darkness closing in, shadows devouring the light. Max. Sophie. But this time she felt them flicker, a spark of recognition warmed their faces. Mommy. They cried. And then a chilling realization flooded her. What if she wasn't fast enough? What if this darkness seized their souls for good, and all that remained were faded memories? In that moment, the laughter erupted from the well, real and haunting, until it morphed into something more sinister, something wilder. Something that echoed with haunting maniacal glee. Fear propelled her feet, pounding toward the shadows that had taken so much. Heart racing, she pushed past the pulling darkness and reached for her children, hoping they weren't already gone forever. But when she finally touched their hands, something shifted. A low rumble reverberated through the air, and the shadows drew back only to swell and take on a new form. The haunting laughter diminished, but the whispers intensified, now promising her everything she had fled from. Stay with us forever. The well loomed larger now, shadows coalescing into figures that swayed and danced. The clearing pulsed with a life of its own as Emily realized fear was just the beginning. What if the well was more than a gate? What if it was the mouth of something primal, something hungry? And suddenly, the earth rumbled with desire, and she understood that escape was a fleeting illusion. Her children were slipping. Were they being drawn in? What choices lay ahead when every path only led to darkness? As the figures circled tighter, she felt a pull toward the abyss, and within that moment of clarity, terror crashed against her like a wave. Would she succumb to the calls of the shadows or fight for the last flicker of light? The shadows enveloped Emily, wrapping around her limbs like cold fingers, tightening their grip as if warning her of the terror lurking at the edge of silence. She could feel the heartbeat of the well pulsing beneath her feet, a grotesque rhythm drawing every breath deeper into despair. How long before she became one of those figures? Trapped, swaying on the edge of eternal twilight, Max and Sophie's hands felt warm and familiar, yet their eyes, oh, those wide, innocent eyes were vacant, as if they were miles away. A scream tried to claw its way up her throat, but she bit it down hard. She couldn't panic, not now. Not in the face of this nightmare. You need to fight it, she urged, her voice steady, pushing against the hatred of the shadows. Remember who you are. But the more she struggled, the stronger the grip of the darkness became. Max's body jerked, the erratic movements confusing her. Mommy. He called again, this time with a glitching voice that was a mix of her son and the unknown. It feels good. Come play. No. She screamed, tugging them toward her, desperate to break the spell. The faint flicker of awareness she had seen in Sophie's eyes seemed to wane, swallowed by the shadows. You have to come back. Suddenly, the ground beneath Emily began to tremble in earnest, sending shockwaves up her legs. The figures gathered around the well spun faster, a cyclone of muted colors swirling into a black storm of limbs and whispers. Echoes of laughter drowned out her thoughts, merging, expanding into a horrifying symphony of longing and loss. Emily, the voice from the well grew louder, each word like thunder striking her core. Join us, join your children. We are one. We are home. Clarity flickered again like a dying ember. Was it true? Was this really the end? The thought flooded her with dread, her heart stuttered she could never abandon her children to this terror. Blood rushed in her ears, a drum pounding the rhythm of time slipping through her fingers. She clenched her fists, pulling from every ounce of remaining strength, every cherished memory of laughter and warmth. Max. Sophie. She cried out again, a final plea. You are my light. Come back to me. Fight. A palpable shift occurred in the shadows, an alarming ripple as recognition flitted across Sophie's face. A moment, just a moment, her daughter's eyes darted back to Emily, struggling against the tides, flickering with life. Little hands grasped for hers, breaking through the fog just enough to show they weren't gone. But would it last? Then, without warning, the laughter crescendoed into a piercing shriek, and the shadows lunged. Emily felt a jolt as something grabbed her ankle, yanking her sideways. The edges of panic clawed up her throat. No. Her voice rang out, a desperate lighthouse against a storm. With one determined heave, she pulled Max and Sophie to her, throwing them away from the well as if it were a snake. The impact jarred them free of the spell. Mommy. They cried together, voices mingling back into reality, but their faces were still twisted, a fragile mask hiding fear and confusion. But it was only a moment. A blinding flash captured Emily's attention, pulling her gaze toward the well. The air vibrated with urgency as dark figures poured forth in a chaotic surge, like shadows escaping from the deepest part of hell. The whispers twisted, melded into a guttural chant that accelerated time, voices clamoring for her, seeking her submission to the impending void. The well wasn't just a passage, it was a cave of judgment, insatiable, urging her to hand over everything righteous she had ever known. The ground shivered again beneath her feet, threatening to pull her and her children down. She dug into the earth, anchoring her presence, and squeezed the hands of her children just as the shadows began to swirl close again. What do we do, Mommy? Sophie whimpered, eyes darting frantically around the encroaching darkness. Hold on tightly. We're getting out of here. Emily's heart raced as a fierce determination surged through her veins. She took a tentative step back, the shadows rushing forward like a tidal wave, but the chuckling grew louder, and the figures began to morph into recognizable forms, twisted versions of people from her past. Family members lost, friends whom she thought safe, all beckoning to her with open arms, echoing with sinister allure. Emily, join us, they chorused, voices layered, menacing yet familiar. It's easier to surrender. The well seemed to inhale deeply, an abyss threatening to engulf her whole. The choice laid before her was stark: fight against this growing darkness or let go, descending into the seductive void alongside her children. Stay with me, she shouted, shaking the hands of her children as they fought the pull together. Then, just as hope began to flicker beneath mounting dread, something unexpected happened. The figures hesitated, fear glimmered in their eyes as they backed away, their forms flickering like a weak light. Suddenly, dark tendrils slithered past her, trying to grasp the children, as Emily's blood turned cold. What if whatever held her children beneath could still take them? What if they weren't out of reach? With every ounce of bravery, she tightened her grip on Max and Sophie. "We're escaping. Now!" she yelled. But as they turned to run, Emily felt the shadows clutching at her, ready to seize every last fragment of their light. "Mommy!" They screamed, laughter and terror merging into one insidious chant. Emily's heart thundered as she tore her eyes away from the well, racing into darkness, but fear cycled back what awaited them in the forest. Would they truly escape, or was the curse marked upon them all along? As they broke into the tree's cover, the whispers raged behind them, insistent and eager. "You can't run from what is already in your soul." The night closed in, fervent whispers entwining with the wind, and Emily understood they could never truly leave this horror behind. What awaited them in the shadows? Would they ever truly be free? The forest loomed like an endless nightmare, twisting and perverting the reality of what lay ahead. Emily could feel the darkness swirling around them, whispering promises of despair, the trees themselves creaking like old bones. Each step felt leaden, as if the very earth conspired to drag her down, but she forced herself to move, dragging her children along with her. "Mommy, I see things," Max exclaimed, his voice cracking with terror. "It's really dark, Mommy." "What do you see?" she pressed, glancing over her shoulder. The dim light was fading fast, the shadows seemingly chasing them, hungry. "Figures, they look like us. But they aren't. They're not us," Max stammered, eyes wide. "Don't look back," Emily commanded, tightening her grip on her son, her heart pounding against her ribs. They could not afford to stop. Not for a moment. Not until they were safe. A low rumble echoed through the trees, a deep growl that rippled through the air like a low whistle of winter wind. The forest seemed alive, vibrating at the edges of her sanity. The shadows were close, too close, fluttering at the corners of her vision. Between the trees, dark shapes lurked, twisting and writhing, hungry for the warmth she protected, eager to feast on the life she fought to keep. "Mommy, they're laughing again," Sophie shrieked. Her voice cut through the cacophony like a shard of glass, and Emily's stomach churned with dread. "Keep running. We're almost there," Emily shouted, though she didn't know where there was. Panic weaved around her thoughts, tightening its grip, but they had to survive. They had to escape. As they stumbled deeper into the forest, the ground grew uneven, roots and stones clawed at their feet, ready to trip them up. The shadows loomed larger, crafting grotesque forms in the periphery, casting an unsettling glow. The laughter grew louder, agitated, and unending, a dark chorus that wrapped around them like a cocoon. "Mommy, I can't," Max gasped, his little legs starting to slow. "Don't you dare stop. We need to keep moving," Emily barked, the urgency in her voice startling them both. Suddenly, an icy breath brushed against her neck. Emily turned, her heart racing, but the path behind them was empty, swallowed by the darkness. She threw her gaze to the sides, a sickening feeling of being watched simmering under her skin. The whispering shadows teased her ears, their voices growing jarring, slithering into her mind. "Let them go, Emily. Embrace the void." The figures from the well twisted in her memory, their faces warping into monstrous visages. She could hear them, their voices merging into one, sounding like a haunting lullaby, summoning her to join their dark numbers. They promised warmth, a reunion. But it was all a lie, a trap waiting to ensnare her. "Mommy." Sophie's voice cracked like shattered glass. "I feel them. They're here. They want to let us go." Emily squeezed her children tighter, summoning every bit of courage she could muster. "They're not real. Keep running." They burst into a clearing bathed in an eerie, silvery light. The moon hung low, its glow flickering as if struggling to breach the thick shadows. The warmth of her children's hands in hers felt like a lifeline amid the horror that swirled around them. But as they caught their breath, the whispers formed a singular voice, echoing through the silence. You thought you could escape. It coiled around Emily, twisting through her thoughts like an insidious serpent. Panic gripped her chest, but despair clawed at her soul. Stay close, she urged, scanning the clearing desperately for a way out, every fiber of her being alive with instinct fight or flight. The shadows encroached, slinking closer, pulling at the edges of their refuge. Mommy? Sophie's voice quivered, drawing Emily's focus as a dark flock of figures gathered along the tree line. What if they want us to follow them? The question lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't just fear that tormented her, it was a nagging pull, a suggestion that twisted her resolve. The figures beckoned, their hollow eyes shimmering like dying stars, filling the night with a sense of despair that crushed her heart. Emily tightened her hold again, pulling her kids closer. She could feel the warmth of their bodies next to her, a fragile shield against the growing terror. No. We're not going anywhere. We're staying together. Then, the ground began to shake, and the trees behind them started to crack and splinter. Emily's breath hitched as she realized something huge was moving through the forest toward them. The shadows danced wildly, morphing into long, entwining limbs reaching out hungrily for the light around them. Trapped, suffocated between malevolence and chaos, she felt the suffocating weight of hopelessness claw at her, relentless. But one thing consumed her thoughts: run. As the trees parted, a nightmarish figure emerged, looming against the moonlight, shrugging off the last vestiges of it with a siphoning darkness that wrapped around it. What the hell is that? Emily gasped, her heart racing, mind racing faster, with shadows creeping closer. What chance did they have against whatever haunted these woods? And that was just the beginning. As Emily felt the darkness close in, she realized the threat was growing, shifting, and soon they would know the answer to the question. How far would they have to run before the shadows caught up to them? The ground exploded beneath them, a cacophony of splintering wood and snapping roots as the ancient trees swayed with unnatural fury. Emily's heart thundered in her chest, drowning out the sinister whispers that clawed at her thoughts. Run! She screamed again, barely registering Max and Sophie's terrified faces as they stumbled to keep pace. The air buzzed with a palpable dread. Something was coming. Silhouettes emerged out of the dark, twisted looming shapes that danced on the edges of reason. They were no longer simply shadows but grotesque reflections of Emily and her children, each one grinning with a malice that sent icy tendrils of fear deep into her bones. Mommy, they're us! Sophie cried, clinging desperately to Emily's arm, her small fingers shaking. They can't hurt us! Emily shouted, her voice wavering, the conviction running thin in her throat. But the words felt empty, hollow in the churning blackness around them. They were losing ground, the figures slithering forward, inching closer as laughter twisted into taunts, echoing her own fears back at her. Emily forced them into a sprint, the clearing no longer a sanctuary but a trap, walls of darkness closing in. Each footfall brought the creatures closer, their distorted faces morphing into something even more horrifying, mouths stretching into grotesque smiles that promised nothing but despair. Keep going, she gasped, glancing back. The monstrous duplicates lunged, fingers like claws clawing through the shadows, eager to grasp at her children. The ground beneath them felt more like quicksand, pulling at her legs, trying to drag her down. Mommy, I'm scared. Max cried, his breaths coming in short gasps, tears streaming down his cheeks. I know. Just hold on, she urged, feeling her heart splinter with each cry. In a desperate bid to escape, Emily sprinted toward a thicket of twisted underbrush ahead. The trees seemed to bow, their gnarled branches reaching out like fingers meant to catch them. The unseen thing behind them was gaining, the laughter curling around her, echoing through the darkness as if it were mocking her resolve. Through the ragged breaths and pounding hearts, she caught sight of a glimmer of faint light shining through the trees. Her pulse quickened with a flicker of hope, igniting something primal within her. There! She cried, pointing to the beacon. She could not afford to stop, to question if it was real. They rushed toward it, adrenaline flooding her veins as the shadows behind them let out a screeching cry, their frustration spilling into the night like boiling water. As they neared the light, it flickered violently, casting strange shapes along their path. But there was no time to consider the source or whether it was a trick of the dark. They plunged forward, urgency fueling every ragged breath until they broke free into a wider open space. And there it was. An old, forgotten cabin stood defiantly against the encroaching shadows, its wooden frame weathered and cracked, yet inviting with its warm glow. Emily barely hesitated as she pushed the kids through the door, slamming it shut behind them. The light flooded over them in a warm embrace, but the euphoria was short-lived. The whispering darkness surrounded the cabin, clawing at the walls, its insidious voice creeping through the cracks. You cannot hide, you cannot escape. The feeling of safety began to crumble, the atmosphere inside vibrating with unease. Emily locked the door, but she could hear them, a chilling tapping, like nails scraping against wood, testing their defenses. What do we do, Mommy? Max quivered. Emily's mind raced. She fought to think, to come up with a plan to shield her children from the encroaching horror outside. Their eyes darted around the room, filled with dread. Every creak in the wooden floor might as well have been a death knell echoing through their sanctuary, and then, another sound broke through, a soft, pleading voice, barely discernible against the scratching. Help us! Emily froze, her heart plummeting. Did you hear that? What? Sophie whispered, eyes wide, scanning the shadows just beyond the cabin's perimeter. It came again, more insistent, more desperate now. Help us! Join us! The floor groaned beneath Emily's feet as if responding to the voice, shifting the very foundation of reality itself. The shadows seemed to thicken, pressing against the cabin walls. Mommy, what do we do? The urge to move, to act, to save her children battled against the deepening darkness that began to seep through the cracks, and she realized the horrifying truth. Whatever was outside wasn't just waiting to tear them apart. It wanted them to surrender themselves to the void, to experience the same darkness that had claimed before. No! She shouted, clenching her jaw. We're not going anywhere. We fight. As the voice pressed closer, the cabin trembled around them, and Emily steeled herself against the terror. But in that awful moment, the words echoed one last time in her mind, chilling her to the bone. Help us! It wasn't just a plea. It was a promise. What awaited them in this void where shadows lurked? Would they end up joining those lost souls, or could they somehow break the cycle? The air thickened as they prepared to face the unspeakable, with darkness closing its grip tighter. The walls shook, a thunderous reminder of the forces pounding at their fragile sanctuary. Emily's breath quickened, a suffocating anxiety swelling in her chest. The shadows whispered again, the voice intertwining with her heartbeat, relentless, hypnotic. Help us! Join us, Mommy. Max clutched her leg, his small fingers digging into her skin like claws. Sophie pressed against her side, lips trembling in fear. They were anything but safe. Emily glanced at the dusty corners of the cabin, marked by time and abandonment. We need something, anything to hold them off. Her voice was sharp, desperation bubbling under each word, but the only thing that caught her eye was an old lantern perched atop a rickety table. Its glass was cracked, but within it lay a weak, flickering flame. It didn't seem much, yet she rushed forward, taking it in her hands. Hope fought against despair. Listen to me. We are not alone, and we won't be taken, she said fiercely. She reached for the lantern, holding it up as though it could ward off the terrible presence outside. The cabin let out a low groan, as if angry at her defiance. The whispers intensified, clawing at her sanity. Help! It's safe here. Join us! The voices turned to a mournful chorus, a symphony of lost souls weaving through the air and tightening around her. Go away! Emily screamed, and the sound seemed to momentarily drown the cries. But she could see the shadows outside throbbing in response, a pulsating mass waiting for any weakness. With no time to waste, she turned to her children, heart pounding in her ears. We need to barricade the windows. Grab anything you can find. Max and Sophie moved slowly, confusion and fear gripping them. They picked up small furniture, their young faces tight with uncertainty. Emily rushed to the nearest window, her hands trembling as she pushed an old cabinet against it. The lantern flickered, casting frantic shadows across the room. Emily felt an odd sensation, a tugging in her chest, drawing her toward the window and the darkness beyond. She shook her head, trying to dispel the pull, but the allure of familiarity beckoned her. "You are already a part of us," the voices cooed, seductive and soft. "Your children, your heart, we will be one." "No!" Emily shouted, as if trying to tear herself away from the gaping void. Her heart raced, wild and panicked, urging her to remember who she was. She couldn't. Not now. She needed to protect Max and Sophie. The sound of nails scraping against the cabin's wood grew louder, like a sinister countdown echoing in her ears. The whispers turned into guttural breaths, threatening to suffocate her resolve. Sophie whimpered, "Mommy, I'm scared we'll get through this." "Just hold on to me," Emily shouted, but doubts clawed at her mind. With each push of her heart, the shadows twisted tighter around them, shadows that looked all too familiar. "Awaken the broken bond," the shadows murmured, their raspy tones imbued with something unsettling. A memory flickered in Emily's mind as if long-buried truths were rising to the surface, echoing through the ages. Something smashed into the window, splintering the wood and sending shards raining across the floor. Emily whipped around, adrenaline surging. It was time to act. "Stay behind me," she yelled, rushing back toward her children, determination flooding her vessel. But as the shadows pooled into the cabin, desperate faces emerged, faces that had once been kind, loved, and were now morphed into horrific reflections of despair. "Mommy, please." Max's small voice pierced through the chaos. The voyeuristic gaze of their own specters filled the room, twisting Emily's soul with haunting memories. She had a choice: embrace the fear and follow them, or risk losing everything. "I choose you," she screamed. Strengthening her grip on the lantern, she prepared for the oncoming tide of darkness, ready to face whatever consequence awaited. But then, from the corner of her eye, something flickered in the distance, a shadow that didn't belong. A glimmer of silver even deeper in the woods outside called to her. What could it be? A way to escape, or another trap waiting to ensnare them deeper into the darkness? As Emily steadied herself for the final confrontation, dread seeped into her marrow. The choice was more than a mere decision, it held the key to their very existence. Would she join or defy the shadows? The whispers grew louder, enveloping her senses. And then, she saw it, the silver shape emerging steadily, pulling in the shadows along with it. Where would that lead them? Max shrank behind Emily's skirt, eyes wide and glistening with unspilled tears. Sophie stood frozen, the echoes of their family's distorted past hanging thick in the air. The lantern flickered, its weak light battling the burgeoning darkness. Emily took a deep breath, hoping her resolve would keep the shadows at bay, though fear gnawed at her insides. "Emily," a voice echoed from the gathering gloom. It was her own mother's voice, dripping with sweet familiarity yet edged with a tone so unsettling, it felt akin to poison. "Don't you remember? We're here to help stop," Emily shouted, clenching the lantern tighter. The specters twisted and writhed, their faces void of life yet filled with a haunting familiarity that clawed at her memories. Each face pulled at the tendrils of her past, memories she had long buried. The silver glimmer in the distance pulsed, drawing her gaze away from the chaos. It flickered like a heartbeat, and with each thrum, it seemed to push back against the shadows. Was it a beacon of hope, or a lure deeper into their nightmare? "Mommy, please. Make them go away." Max's plea broke through the whirlwind of whispers, anchoring her to the moment. She couldn't let the shadows take him. The beasts beyond the walls had multiplied now, scratching and scraping, hungry for something or someone. They wanted to pull her into their abyss. But that silver light, sharper now, glinted with tantalizing promise. "You can join us, become whole again," her mother's specter urged, arms reaching out, pooling shadows pooling like ink at her feet. "No, no, no," Emily screamed, wrenching herself from the memory's grip. "I have my children. I will protect them." With each word, her voice grew in strength, forcing space between them and the swirling terror. But it came at a cost. Shadows surged forward, unfurling like dark waves eager to consume. "Mommy, the windows." Sophie cried, her voice strained as she tugged Emily's arm, pointing frantically at the splintered wood that was beginning to crack further. They needed to act fast. We need to find a way out. Now. Emily gasped, casting another desperate glance at the ominous silver. It now pulsated more brightly, a beacon shrouded by the consuming dread surrounding them. Emily turned back, urgency taking over as she rallied her kids. Can you both help me? We need to push the cabinet to another window. What if it doesn't work? What if they get in? Max's small voice wobbled, threading tension throughout the room. Then we fight. Together. Emily lifted her chin, adrenaline surging through her veins. They could defy this. They had to. The shadows seemed to recoil, uncertainty washing through them at her words. The old wooden structure creaked under the pressure as they worked, a few choice furniture pieces propped against the remaining windows. The children's faces shifted from fear to determination as momentum built. Just as they positioned the last cabinet, the wind howled outside, the shriek mingling with the unsettling whispers. You cannot escape. The voice boomed louder, vibrating in their chests, pulling on their very souls. Then, an anguished scream pierced the night, one that wasn't in their cabin. It echoed through the trees, raw and echoing against the bleak backdrop of their fears. The lantern flickered wildly, a battle of light against an ocean of darkness flooding to claim them. Mommy, the light! Sophie cried out, pointing as the flame flickered once, twice, then went out, swallowing their only hope in a viscous darkness. Breath caught in Emily's throat. But before despair could settle, the silver glimmer outside flared, illuminating the night with a brilliant light, a blinding, obsidian shimmer cutting through layers of gloom. Follow me. Emily shouted. She felt the pull towards the light, a magnetic force calling to her spirit. As they bolted toward the door, the weights of the past erupted in a torrent of sound, cries rising to a cacophonous din. The specters twisted angrily, an oncoming tide furious and fractious in pursuit. With a flick of her wrist, Emily threw open the door, stepping towards the uncertain. Together. She shouted, leading her children into the night, but as they stepped beyond the threshold, the ground trembled, darkness swirling hungrily around them. The silver light pulsed again, casting them into stark relief against the backdrop of terrifying shadows that screamed their names. The weights of the past would not be easily cast aside. Where would this light lead them? Would they find safety, or face something darker than they ever imagined? Emily burst out the door, adrenaline propelling her body forward as she pulled Max and Sophie behind her. The chill of the night air hit her like a slap, yet it invigorated her. Keep moving. Don't look back. She urged, her voice raw and unwavering. The silver light pulsated ahead, cutting through the darkness like a knife. It reminded her of hope, the kind of tenacity she wouldn't let fade. The shadows lurked behind, eager to reclaim what was theirs. Emily could hear them whispering, clawing at the edges of her resolve. You can't escape. We're part of you. The words slithered into her consciousness, wrapping around her heart, trying to squeeze out her strength. Mommy, I'm scared. Max whimpered, his grip slipping as they raced through the overgrown path. He stumbled, but she was there to catch him before he fell. You're strong. We're strong. She gasped, trying to instill that strength into him even as fear gnawed at her insides. Sophie looked back, her face pale, haunted by the shadowy figures flickering behind. They want to take us back. They want us to join them. The words sliced through Emily, igniting fury within her. No. Emily shouted defiantly. We're breaking this cycle. We want to go back. With renewed determination, they pushed forward. The clearing widened, with trees bowing away as if they sensed the tension. The silver light shimmered, revealing an ancient stone circle that pulsed with energy. Entranced, Emily felt the call of its brightness. Was this their escape? But as they approached, the shadows surged once again, a vortex of anger swirling behind them. Join us, Emily. You can't deny your past. It's who you are. The voices were a chilling chorus, a twisted family calling her to return to their fold. We're not family. Emily screamed, turning back toward the darkness with defiance burning in her chest. You're nothing but a nightmare. The stone circle glimmered with an ethereal glow as she reached it, instinct guiding her actions. Sophie. Max. Stand here. She positioned herself between her children and the encroaching shadows. This is our moment. We're free. We can choose the light. The air trembled with energy as she raised her trembling hands toward the silver light. At first, it flickered, but then it flared brilliantly, pushing back against the dark tendrils reaching toward them. For a split second, Emily felt the shadows withdraw, an uncharacteristic uncertainty settling over them. Fight back. Together. She urged the kids. Max and Sophie clasped hands, eyes wide but fierce. They were her lifeline, her reason to resist. Together. They echoed, their voices harmonizing with power, a trio bonded against the darkness. The vortex faded slightly, a hush enveloping them. Hold on to each other, Emily commanded, feeling the pulse of the light grow stronger. But the shadows recoiled, tightening their grip in defiance. You cannot escape what dwells within you. You will join us. They screeched, more furious than before, a tidal wave of longing and despair. This is our choice. Emily roared back, her voice echoing like thunder against the darkness. We are not afraid. As the shadows surged forward, a blinding light erupted from the stones. Emily felt it wash over them, warmth and security enveloping them fully. With one final push of will, she cried out, "Go!" With that declaration, the energy burst forth, illuminating the entire clearing, blinding the figures that begged her to return. The shadows shrieked, the sound chilling, like claws scraping against reality. Keep holding on. Emily shouted as the light sparked and pulsed, tightening around them like a protective cocoon. She could feel the tendrils of darkness reaching out to snatch them away, but the light grew more potent, forcing the malicious whispers to shriek in agony. Then the shadows imploded inward as the light collided with darkness, erupting in a flash. Emily shielded her eyes, heart racing as everything came crashing together. She felt her body lift, swirling in its embrace, and then a breath of fresh air, the serenity of a bright dawn emerged. The scent of damp earth and blooming flowers filled her lungs, wrapping her in warmth. The light faded slowly, revealing the lush green of a reclaimed forest prepared for new beginnings. Mommy? Max's small voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to find him and Sophie beside her, alive and shaken but free. Yes. We did it. We're okay. She hugged them tightly, relief crashing over her like a tidal wave. They were whole, just as they had been meant to be. Kneeling, she brushed her thumbs over their tear-stained cheeks, securing the moment in her heart. Together, they had faced the darkness and chosen each other, chosen their bond over any malevolent force. The past was behind them, not forgotten, but no longer their burden. The echoes of despair faded away, and Emily felt a new sense of peace wash over them. Let us go home, she whispered, the weight of anxiety finally lifting. As they began their journey back, each step felt lighter, free of the shadows that had threatened to consume them. They stepped confidently into their future, ready to embrace whatever came next. But somewhere in the distance, just beyond the edges of the trees, a lingering whisper echoed on the wind. You may have left, but we're never truly gone yet. Emily held fast to her children, undeterred by the darkness that once consumed her. They were victorious. Their journey continued, filled with the promise of hope and bright tomorrows. Emily took a deep breath, the chill of uncertainty melting away. The sun peeked through the leaves, illuminating the path ahead, brighter than ever. You need to subscribe now for more exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us grow. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. And please, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.